Welcome, everyone, to the next edition of the 12th Horseshoe Podcast. I'm Elijah Weintraub, joined us alongside Jack Rizzo, and today is a very special episode of the 12th Horseshoe Podcast. We're interviewing today Arda Ocal from the NHL and ESPN and SportsCenter. Arda, thank you for joining us.
Gentlemen, thank you for having me. Thank you for the invite. Very happy to be here. Keep up that great grind. The podcast game can be a challenging one, but the fact you guys are trucking along is a really good thing. So thanks for having me.
All right,
thank you. Absolutely, yep. So first off, before we start asking questions, Arda, how are you doing today?
I'm great. It's a sunny day in Bristol, Connecticut. I have a couple shows. I'm on campus here at ESPN, and it is a wonderful day. Sun's out. People are happy. Usually when, that vitamin D is coming from the sky, people are in a cheery mood, and you just feed off of that, right? Like the positivity is contagious. So, good moods all around. How about you guys?
Yeah, we're doing good.
We're doing wonderful. Yep.
Good.
All right. So first off, Eli and I have like 3 to 4 questions that we're gonna ask you. Gonna make this as quick as possible, but before we ask our questions, Arda, would you mind just like talking about like your like broadcasting career and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So I actually didn't go to school for broadcasting. I have a degree in mathematics. I grew up in Canada, and my degree's from the University of Waterloo, which is sort of like known, especially if you're a computer, if you're an engineer, or if you are a computer science major. It's kind of like the MIT of Canada. And so I don't know how I graduated with a math degree from there, but somehow I did. And I worked a regular desk job. I was a project manager for a while, but while I was in high school, through college, and even those first few years of working a desk job, I was always doing something in media, whether it was like writing for the school paper or being a features editor or something like that, to even something as simple as doing the morning announcements, or just like the volunteering at the local radio station. Like, what I didn't realize was this is something I wanted to pursue eventually. I never thought it would be a job option for me. I didn't have any friends or family at all in the industry. I had no leg up. I had no soft entry. The barrier to entry, I thought, was insurmountable. Like, I always thought it was a cool job, people holding a microphone and talking to athletes, or being on the game broadcasts. But I never thought it would be. I didn't even know how to pursue it, to be honest. Like, my parents are immigrants to North America, and they always had the idea of, hey, get a stable job, make a lot of money, be comfortable. Like, that was their sort of dream, right? So mine evolved from there. And probably around my mid-20s, I decided, you know what, I want to give this a try. I'm still going to the local television station and learning everything I can, and I'm doing this on my own time instead of going out and partying with my friends. So I figured, I saved my money pretty well. I could scrape by for a couple of years based on my savings, not live lavishly at all, but just, survive. And I want to give this an honest chance. And if I end up every year at least marginally better than where I was previously, then I'm going to keep going. But at the very least, I have the degree that I could fall back on. If things don't work out, I can still, go back to doing a desk job. And at least I won't look at myself in the mirror when I'm 50 years old or 60 years old and say, why didn't you try when you were younger, right? So I did it. I took the leap. And luckily, I got breaks along the way. I worked hard. I, met people, did everything that you need to do as an aspiring broadcaster. And eventually one thing led to another, and I got opportunities in Canada, which led to me coming to the United States and eventually being with ESPN, which I'm absolutely thrilled.
Wow, what an amazing story. And it's just an incredible how you went from like starting in the math world and going to the broadcast industry with ESPN. That's an amazing story. And I'm going to continue to start off with the questions now. And last month, you had the opportunity to take part of the NHL mascot convention. Could you tell us a little bit about what went on during the convention and what was your impact to the mascots?
Yeah, I got invited to speak at the mascot convention thanks to my dear friend NJ Devil. Many people listening to this, especially if they're Devils fans, will know that he's the NJ Devil is the mascot of the New Jersey Devils. And I have a soft spot for mascots. I know that mascots can be a polarizing topic. I've met many people who work in sports who think that they're ridiculous or silly Or I've even met a couple of people who are scared of mascots or just petrified. They just have some lifelong fear of mascots. I've even seen that. For me, though, I see the benefit of mascots. I think they're a huge part of game presentation. I believe that they create core memories for kids especially attending their first sporting events. I see the impact that they have in the community. And so for me, they are an overwhelming positive contribution and force to sports in general, but to their respective teams as well. So when NJ invited me to come speak at the conference, I did not hesitate. I thought it was awesome that I would even be considered. And I will say that one of my highlights of last season was being one of the coaches at the Mascot Showdown. They have a game right after the skills competition at the All-Star Weekend. This time it was in Sunrise, Florida, where the Florida Panthers play. And I had the opportunity to be one of the coaches for the Eastern Conference, and our team won. And so I am an NHL champion in some regard. That is an official title. I have been given an NHL trophy. It was not the Stanley Cup, but it doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that I can say I am an NHL champion of some sort. And so, but yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was great. That was awesome. The summit was great. It was a lot of creative vibes, and a lot of that content is coming out now too. You're seeing a lot of the mascots collabing on content, and it's great to see. I love it.
Wow, that's awesome. That's so cool. But as a Colts fan, we have the absolute best mascot in the entire sport. Blue is the king. I love him. But yeah, Blue. Everybody loves Blue. I know non-football fans that know who Blue is just because of how iconic he is. But so I know you've talked to us about this before. But so I know before at ESPN you did some League of Legends tournaments. And I know that you didn't really know a lot about League of Legends before you did the tournament. Can you just tell us about like how you prepared for it and what advice you would give to somebody, like say like a hockey fan, but they're asked to like broadcast basketball and they don't know how anything about it? It's like, how would you say to like prepare for that?
So I'll tell you, my first assignment with ESPN was actually being at the desk for the League of Legends World Championship. And I did not know a single thing about League of Legends. I took the next month. I knew it was a month away. It was at Madison Square Garden. And I basically took the next month learning as much as possible about League of Legends, learning the game, playing the game, learning about the competitive scene, learning about the teams, the players, the storylines, everything. I treated it like a full-time job. And that was all in an effort to be prepared as much as possible by the time I sat at that desk at MSG for these games, for the event. And I'm glad I did that, because really what it comes down to, especially as a host, what it comes down to is your preparation, your research really just makes you comfortable and prepared to ask questions to allow your analysts on the desk to shine. That's what your role is. That's what your hope is. And that's why you put in all of the effort and the preparation, all the effort into preparation leading up to an event. That's why you do it, because then you feel confident, you feel like you know the subject matter, and then you can roll with the punches, especially on live TV, which anything can happen. Any live broadcast, anything can happen. So my advice is just immerse yourself in the subject matter, say yes to everything, because you never know where opportunities will present themselves. And quite frankly, not every opportunity that you are presented will be exactly what you want to do. Just because you want to be a play-by-play announcer in the NFL, for example, doesn't mean that if someone comes to you and says, hey, we have a Little League World Series opportunity for someone, would you be interested? If you say no, those kind of opportunities may not come as frequently as you want them to. So you have to be prepared to say yes, and also understand that the skills that you're learning doing a different sport will certainly transfer into doing other sports. It's not going to be apples to apples, but it's still going to be transferable skills in terms of research, in terms of when to talk, when to lay out, things like that. Like the cadence might be different by sport, but the overall understanding and that muscle is still definitely in play when you get to different kind of sports. So that's the advice that I would give for anybody that's sort of looking into or maybe they're nervous or scared about doing a sport that they haven't done before. That's what I would tell them.
And that's some of the best advice you could ever give. And moving on to the next question, the ESPN press room announced last month the SportsCenter rankings have gone up by a really good number. How do you feel knowing the impact that you made to this success story for SportsCenter, and what does the future hold in store, and what can we expect from you in the upcoming months with SportsCenter?
So I appreciate that. I'm definitely a small cog in the wheel as it pertains to SportsCenter. I'm very privileged and very happy to contribute the way that I do. I love working with that team. They are a joy. They're very talented. To me, the credit belongs with the crew, the producers, the directors, the graphics department, everybody that works behind the scenes on that show. Everybody at home only sees the hour or 2 hours that is presented on television. They don't see the several hours, full days leading up to that moment that we are live. That all of that effort that goes into the show, you don't see that unless you're watching a feature that was produced on how SportsCenter is made, right? So, first of all the credit goes to the team behind the scenes. They rock, they're awesome, and they're very talented and very passionate, and they work very, very, very hard. So they definitely deserve all the flowers that should be thrown at them. And then, of course, that's a testament to the people that want to see the ones that host SportsCenter regularly and the ones that are on the air several days a week. They are just extremely talented, and they are, they've earned the trust of the audience. They've earned the reputations that they deserve. And SportsCenter is an institution, right? Even if you don't watch SportsCenter every day, you know what SportsCenter is. The brand recognition in America is as high as it could possibly get, right? SportsCenter has been around for over 40 years. You know what it is, you know what you're going to get, and it also consistently evolves. And so to be a very small part of that team, to be somebody that contributes in a certain way. I get to, I've done maybe a couple hundred episodes of SportsCenter now in my ESPN career, and I'm extremely thrilled on U.S. television, and I'm extremely thrilled that I've been given that opportunity and continue to. So, personally, it's great. But again, I go back to saying the people behind the scenes deserve a large amount of credit for the success of SportsCenter and the fact that people continue to tune in and watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I always think about those people behind the scenes because they're the ones who get everything on the air and all that stuff. It really is a team effort. But this is a pretty broad question. I'm sure you get asked this a lot. But which broadcasters had the biggest influence on you throughout your career, and who do you think has helped you become the broadcaster you've become today?
Sure. I grew up in Canada, so obviously my answers are a little bit Canada-centric. There was a hockey host by the name of Ron MacLean. He was the host of Hockey Night in Canada, which was a Saturday night program in Canada, essentially the biggest sporting event of the week growing up, and it's still a very, very vital part of Canadian culture and Canadian sports. And Ron MacLean is still the host. He's been the host for decades, and he was my first hero. He was the guy that I looked at and I was like, I want to be like that guy, because his job was cool and he was, compelling and interesting. And I always loved broadcasts hosted by him. And the play-by-play announcers for a very long time on Hockey Night in Canada were two individuals by the name of Bob Cole and Harry Neal. Bob Cole was the play-by-play announcer. He was also, the soundtrack of a generation. He called the Canadian feed when Team Canada won the Olympics in 2002. That's one of my fondest memories. And, multiple Stanley Cups in international competitions. So those would be the two in hockey. I was also a big fan of WWE growing up. So I would say two of my favorites from there would have been Mean Gene Okerlund and Howard Finkel. I have since been able to befriend both of them. They've both left us, unfortunately. But while they were still here, it was really nice to befriend them and really pick their brains on the industry and longevity too, because they had careers spanning decades at the very top level. So to be able to have that knowledge was invaluable. But also growing up, I had the Canadian version of SportsCenter. So the anchors that went through there, there's a lot of legends in Canada, but now working at ESPN, I have the opportunity to have the exposure. A lot of anchors from SportsCenter in the 90s and throughout the decades still work here. So it's really fun to hear their stories. It's really fun to hear their journeys through ESPN and how they've been able to carve their paths and stay at the worldwide leader for so long. It's always interesting to hear those stories. I'm a nerd for that kind of stuff, so I'm at the right place to hear those kind of stories.
Wow, and that's an incredible story. And obviously, when we come from the broadcast world, we always have idols growing up, and to know that somebody also has idols, not just from where you're from, and that's amazing to hear that. Even though you work in the United States now, you had idols from Canada, and I'm sure a lot of other broadcasters have idols other than from where they live now. And that's an amazing story to hear. And moving on to the next question. Yesterday, the Walt Disney Company and ESPN announced about ESPN Bet, the new betting service that's going to be coming out in fall. What do you think your impact is going to be in promoting that new service that ESPN is introducing? And what do you know so far about it?
I know very little. I saw the news just like everybody else yesterday as it was officially announced. And I really don't know how it's going to weave its way into my particular job moving forward. I have heard nothing. It's obviously very new. And so I really don't know any specifics or any details and how it will be integrated anywhere or whatever the case may be. All the information that's out there right now is really what I know. And that is in part because I'm working on, it's status quo for me at the moment. All systems go, do what I'm doing, and nothing has changed at the moment. Will it? I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? It could. It could not. But also because I've taken some time off, and so I've been a little detached from the inner workings or whatever the happenings at ESPN, I should say. So from that point of view, I don't really have much to share, unfortunately, guys. But I will say that it's a really exciting time, certainly. Based on what ESPN has officially announced, it sounds monumental, and so I can't wait to see what comes of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's pretty interesting in my opinion. So another question. So obviously being from Canada, first off, I absolutely love Canada. The people are probably the nicest people I've ever met, but most of them only seem to care about hockey. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, coming to the United States, what was it like to be here, where I would say we have a more diverse sporting world here?
Well, it is diverse in Canada. I think the difference is that hockey is the number one sport in Canada, whereas in America, in the United States, football reigns supreme, right? Like the NFL, college football, baseball, basketball. These are all those sports have more of a cachet in the United States. And that's not to say that hockey is not popular in the United States at all. It certainly is. I'm just saying that in Canada, when you look at the percentage of the population that watches hockey versus other sports, it's tangible because hockey is such a part of Canadian culture and so important to Canadians. It's essentially the most cared about sport. And in many cases, the national pastime, really, of Canada, and has been for a very long time. And there are other sports, certainly, look at the ratings for the Raptors, particularly during their championship run in 2019. Clearly, other sports matter. One thing I will say about Canada is, and I feel this even more having moved to the United States, living here, and then now as a U.S. citizen, and having. I was born and raised in Canada, and now I'm a U.S. citizen. I feel this even more now being here. Canadians are very proud when other Canadians do something extraordinary outside of Canada, particularly in the United States. So when a Canadian actor or a Canadian musician or a Canadian athlete excels and succeeds or gets to the top of their profession or wins a championship or something like that, an Olympic gold medal or whatever it is, Canadians are very, very proud of that. Because remember, Canada is a tenth of the population of the United States. You know, like just in and around that number. Like it is very small in population as compared to the United States, and it is consistently seen as, you know, the little brother to the north, or the little sibling to the north, in a way, you know. So when something like that happens, Canadians get very proud of that, and Canadians often seek each other out, and it's sort of a community in that sense, because that pride definitely exists. But it's a very polite pride. Canadians are very polite people, so it's not necessarily a not always, like, you know, super outwardly, but the pride and the happiness definitely exists.
Wow, that's a pretty exciting story coming from Canada and learning more about it. As here in the United States, you know, we don't really hear too much in depth about what goes on in Canada as much, and that's pretty good story that you provided there. And another question I have is, you do SportsCenter Snapchat as well, which is on Snapchat. And could you also tell us a little bit about what's the difference between the two types of broadcasts, between like a TV one and what you do for Snapchat, and what makes SportsCenter Snapchat a little bit better than the one we watch on TV regularly?
I don't know if better is the right way to say it. It's definitely different, and it definitely caters to different audiences. So I guess if you were to ask different demographics, they might categorize it as better, but maybe it's only because they watch it more, or that's how they consume it. SportsCenter Snapchat is definitely catered to a younger audience. So the way that it's presented, the way the stories that are covered, are certainly stories that you may not see on SportsCenter television. The Paul brothers are a perfect example of that. LaMelo Ball, LeBron James, like LeBron gets covered everywhere. But on SportsCenter Snapchat, from my experience, it's definitely it's definitely like athlete-based, star-based. A lot of sports-adjacent stories make SportsCenter Snapchat. A lot of stories that the younger generation would care about more than seeing a sports highlight from the day. You know, so the philosophy of putting together SportsCenter Snapchat certainly differs from the philosophy of putting together SportsCenter television. Now, also remember that SportsCenter Snapchat was made less than 10 years ago. It started less than 10 years ago, and it has a much different. When you create something new, it allows the opportunity is afforded to be creative and different with it, which is why you see I don't wear a suit and tie on SportsCenter Snapchat, for example. I wear a suit and tie all the time on SportsCenter TV. SportsCenter TV is an institution. It's been there for 40 plus years. There is a method to creating that show, and though you can be creative, there's still the sandbox that you operate within. And so. And that's because SportsCenter has a formula of success and a way to do things. That doesn't mean that it can't be disrupted. I'm just saying that there are certain things that like you will see. Like I know that I will be wearing a suit and I will be talking about certain stories, highlights, on cameras, voiceovers, graphics, etc. Like I understand there is a cadence to SportsCenter TV, which is terrific, and so. I feel like both of them, having worked in both of them extensively, it's definitely different. It's definitely the vibe of it is different. The approach is different, but I wouldn't say one is better than the other. I would say that both of them bring positives, especially for me. Like I see the positives in both of them. I derive joy from both of them. So all in all, if I continue to do both Snapchat and TV, that would be a great career for me. It would be fun.
Yeah, it sounds great. It kind of reminds me of how the Mets are. Like the radio announcers for Mets, they kind of just wear like normal street clothes. It seems like, but when they're on the radio, but Garrett, Keith, and Ron, they usually wear suits or whatever. So it shows how different that is. So we've got one more question for you before we wrap this up. Kind of a fun one, but hockey season's coming up. We've got, I think, less than 2 months or about 2 months now till the season starts. So I am a New York Rangers fan. And my favorite player happens to be from Canada, Alexis Lafreniere, and Eli is a Devils fan. So
great story, by the way, about the mascot.
How do you think the Rangers and the Devils are going to do this year?
So let's start with the Devils. I think they're a goaltender away from the Cup final. They are a strong team. They made a lot of great additions. I know they lost some pieces, Miles Wood being one of them, Damon Severson. But they added a lot of great players, like Tyler Toffoli's at the top of the list. They look like a very dangerous team, and they were a scary team last season. Once they got the biggest question for me is goaltending. I wonder what Vanacek and Schmidt are going to be like this season. Are they going to go and hunt for a third goaltender, maybe a starting goaltender? Like the way that I was describing it before was I felt like the Devils were a John Gibson or a Connor Hellebuck away from a serious run. But if those two goaltenders they have hit, I do think that they're going to be a very dangerous team. They're very fast. They're very exciting. They've become appointment viewing, Jack Hughes in particular. And I wonder how his brother's going to be in the league, Luke Hughes, who will come in. That'll be a lot of fun. The Rangers, I think they have one of the best goaltenders in the league. When he's on his game, he is the best goaltender in the league. And quite frankly, we saw that last season when they made it to the Final Four, went to the semifinals, the conference final. Igor Shesterkin was standing on his head. And he is a wonderful player. That team is really good on the power play. 5-on-5, there's still question marks, but there's still a lot of great players on that team. And I know that there's been some pieces that have left the Rangers, but I know that they have both teams have very passionate fans. It's fun to be in the New York area right now. There's a lot of intrigue and a lot of interesting stories for all three teams, really. But I would say that if I were to pick one team to make the deepest run right now on paper, based on what they got, I would say the Devils. But that doesn't mean the Rangers are fully out of it. I think that there's still a lot of runway there, especially. Let's say this. I think it'll be a really interesting trade deadline and see where things go, because I think the free agent pool next year is going to be really, really big. And so I wonder if teams will decide what to do with their expiring contracts near the trade deadline, and rentals going to teams trying to make a run. And I wonder where the Devils and the Rangers will be at the thick of that.
Yeah, absolutely. The Devils, I definitely saw in that series last year against the Rangers, like how fast they were. I only started watching hockey like a few years ago, but if there's one thing I've learned, you just need a really good goalie and you could go far. I mean, I remember watching the 2019 Game 7 between St. Louis and Boston and all those incredible saves that the Blues goalie made. I forgot what his name was, but yeah, I think a good goaltender can really take you far. And out of all the positions in sports, that's the one, like, as long as you have a good goaltender, you always have a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am so happy that you mentioned about the Devils and how they're going to be doing good. I'm like happy right now in my seat right now. Great job, by the way. And I'm super excited for this upcoming NHL season, especially that the Devils will have, and both the Rangers will have, an outdoor game at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. That's a really cool experience too for both teams. And there's a lot of moments at stake for both these teams. And I'm super excited for the Devils. They'll be a Stanley Cup team, hopefully, praying. And, this is going to be a fun year to watch. And do you watch football at all, and to switch it up? And do you have like a team you follow a lot?
I'm definitely, the Bills are definitely my team. I just watched the first episode of Hard Knocks. I thought it was really good. I thought it was really interesting. I want to hear more from Robert Saleh. I think he's a pretty interesting figure. I loved his speech at the beginning of the episode with like eagles and crows and how they fight. I thought that was really, really interesting. So that's going to be a fascinating team, obviously, because of Aaron Rodgers. But there are a lot of interesting stories in the NFL. And I'm definitely invested.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. And yeah, Hard Knocks, as you mentioned, came out yesterday. I have not seen it yet. I'm going to soon. Hopefully tonight I will have the opportunity to check it out. And I just want to thank you again for joining us here today. You can catch Arda Ocal on SportsCenter and the NHL on ESPN as a studio host, and a lot more. And we'll see him hopefully again as a coach for the mascot convention or the conference game this upcoming season. So we're super excited, and we're so grateful that you had the opportunity to join our show today. Thank you again, Arda. And you can catch more of the 12th Horseshoe Podcast. Our next episode will be tomorrow, where we'll have our full recap of last week's Jets-Browns game, as well as more news information and the start to week 1 of preseason. We'll have all that tomorrow, and you can catch Jack on his show, The Horseshoe Show, tonight, exclusively all about Coats, right here on Surge TV YouTube, and Sports with Mano Mano, which I help out with. You can catch me on that on Saturdays at 10 a.m. And we thank you all for tuning in and watching, and thank you again, Arda, for joining our show today. It was truly a pleasure and honor to have you on our show today.
Gents, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.
You got it,
Have a good
man.
one, everyone.